The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the quiet suburban street as Emily sat on the porch steps of her parents' house, her eyes red and puffy from days of crying. At 24, she had never felt this kind of pain before, a deep, gnawing ache that seemed to radiate from her very bones. Her heart was a shattered puzzle, the pieces strewn across the landscape of her life, and she had no idea how to start putting it back together. It had all seemed so simple a week ago. She had a loving boyfriend, Greg, who, despite their 17-year age difference, had brought stability, joy, and growth into her life. For 2 years, their relationship had been the envy of her friends, a perfect blend of love, adventure, and mutual respect. But when the pandemic hit and Greg, a dedicated nurse, threw himself into his work, the loneliness crept in, slowly at first, then all at once. She remembered the night she met her old high school friend for drinks, a night that spiraled out of control in a way she never intended. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. She just wanted to feel something other than loneliness. But that one night of indiscretion led her to a desperate attempt to salvage her needs by suggesting an open relationship, a suggestion that backfired spectacularly. Now, as she sat on the porch, waiting for Greg to arrive for a talk she both dreaded and longed for, she couldn't help but replay every moment in her mind. The look of hurt in Greg's eyes when she first brought it up, his quiet request for space, and the deafening silence that followed. She knew she had messed up, but she was desperate for a chance to make things right, to rebuild the trust she had so carelessly shattered. As Greg's car pulled into the driveway, her heart pounded in her chest. She saw someone else in the car with him and felt her stomach drop. This was at the moment her world would either start to mend or completely fall apart. She stood up, her legs shaky, and took a deep breath, trying to steady herself for the conversation that would determine her future. Greg got out of the car and walked towards her, his expression unreadable. Emily's eyes filled with tears as he reached out to help her sit back down on the porch steps. The kindness in his touch only made the impending sense of loss feel sharper. She braced herself for his words, knowing that whatever he said next would be the beginning of a new chapter, one she wasn't sure she was ready to face. Emily met Greg on her first day at the hospital. He was assigned to train her, and from the moment she walked into his office, she felt an undeniable connection. Greg, at 41, had an air of confidence and wisdom that drew her in. He was patient and kind, guiding her through the complexities of her new job with a steady hand. Outside of work, they discovered a mutual love for fitness and similar tastes in movies and music. 6 months later, their friendship blossomed into something deeper. Emily took a leap of faith and asked Greg out for coffee. That simple invitation led to a whirlwind romance. She moved in with him, and they spent their days traveling, dining out, and exploring life together. Greg taught her about life, love, and self-respect, and in return, Emily brought a fresh perspective and joy into his world, which had been marred by the loss of his wife 3 years prior. The first year was blissful, filled with laughter, adventure, and mutual growth, but as the pandemic hit, everything changed. Greg, a workaholic by nature, threw himself into his job with even more intensity. The long hours and relentless pressure of managing the hospital's response to the crisis left him exhausted and distant. Emily found herself increasingly lonely, craving the attention and connection that had once been the cornerstone of their relationship. The loneliness reached a breaking point when an old friend from high school reached out to Emily on Facebook. At first, it was just innocent messages, a nostalgic escape from the isolation of lockdown. But as their conversations deepened, Emily found herself drawn to the attention and validation her friend offered. One evening, she agreed to meet him for drinks at an outdoor bar, rationalizing it as a harmless distraction. The night started innocently enough, but as the drinks flowed, the boundaries blurred. Emily felt a thrill she hadn't experienced in months. When her friend leaned in for a kiss, she didn't pull away. The kiss was electric, a brief escape from her reality, but it quickly turned sour. Guilt washed over her, and she pushed him away before things went too far. She left the bar feeling more confused and alone than ever. The next day, the weight of her actions pressed heavily on her. Emily knew she had to come clean to Greg, but she was terrified of losing him. Instead, she convinced herself that an open relationship might be the solution to her loneliness without having to confess her mistake. When she broached the topic with Greg, he listened intently, but the hurt in his eyes was unmistakable. His response was calm but firm. He needed space. Greg's request for space felt like a death sentence. Emily moved back to her parents' house, and the days that followed were a blur of regret and heartache. She replayed their last conversation over and over, each time feeling the sting of her own selfishness more acutely. The silence from Greg was deafening, and she found herself unable to eat or sleep, consumed by the fear that she had lost the best thing that had ever happened to her. A week later, Greg called and asked to meet at her parents' house. Emily's heart raced as she agreed, a mixture of hope and dread filling her chest. When Greg arrived, he had someone with him, and Emily's heart sank. She knew what was coming, but nothing could have prepared her for the finality of his words. He told her that he loved her but that their relationship had shown him they were in different places in their lives. He didn't want to hold her back from living and experiencing life fully. He apologized for keeping her tied down and thanked her for the best 2 years he'd had since losing his wife. Emily felt her world crumble around her as she listened, the weight of her actions crashing down on her. Her father came out to help her inside as Greg spoke with him. Emily's mother gave her something to help her relax, but the pain was too intense to be dulled. Later, she saw a moving truck in the driveway with all her belongings from Greg's place. The finality of it all was overwhelming, and she broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably. The following days were a blur of pain and regret. Emily stayed in bed, barely able to move, her mind replaying every moment of their relationship and the mistake that had cost her everything. Her parents were supportive, but she knew they were disappointed. The weight of her actions was almost unbearable, and the future seemed bleak and uncertain. Yet, amid the darkness, Emily knew she had to find a way to move forward. She had to learn from her mistakes and rebuild her life, piece by piece. She didn't know if Greg would ever forgive her or if they could ever rebuild what they had lost, but she had to try. She owed it to herself and to the love they had shared. Emily decided to seek therapy, determined to understand why she had acted so impulsively and how to prevent it from happening again. She reached out to friends she had distanced herself from during her relationship, slowly rebuilding her support network. She focused on her career, throwing herself into her work as a nurse, finding solace in helping others. Months passed, and the pain slowly began to dull. Emily still missed Greg every day, but she started to find strength in her independence. She learned to forgive herself, understanding that she was human and capable of making mistakes. She hoped that one day, Greg might see the changes she had made and consider giving their love another chance. But for now, she focused on healing, knowing that the journey ahead was long but necessary. Thank you very much for watching to the story so far. I suggest you to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss tomorrow's stories.